He was a millionaire tech CEO heading to the most important boardroom pitch of his career. The jet was waiting, the investors were watching, and his future was down to the minute. But then, just before takeoff, a barefoot boy blocked the aisle of the plane and whispered, "My sister's dying. Please don't leave us." That single moment unraveled everything Grant Elwood thought he knew about success, timing, and what it meant to be human. Who were these children traveling alone? Why was no one else helping them? And what made this powerful man a man trained to move fast and feel nothing? Stay, as the flight prepared to leave him behind, he chose to follow a child into the unknown. What happens when a man chasing billions suddenly finds something priceless in the quiet corner of a hospital room? And how do two abandoned siblings teach a cold-hearted CEO how to become a father? Before we begin, tap like if you believe love is louder than legacy. Subscribe for more real, emotional stories. Share this if you've ever paused for someone others ignored. Now, let's begin the story. The Seattle airport was unusually quiet for a Thursday night. Snow flurries had begun drifting across the runways, just enough to shimmer under the floodlights, but not yet enough to delay departures. Gate 47 stood at the end of Concourse C, dimly lit and mostly empty, save for a few business travelers tapping away on laptops and a young couple arguing softly near the vending machine. The boarding screen above the counter read Flight 722, Seattle C to New York. JFK boarding 8:55 p.m. on time. Grant Elwood adjusted the strap of his leather briefcase and checked his watch. 8:44 p.m. Right on schedule. He had always lived by precision, not just in meetings or finances, but in motion, in thought, and how much time he gave to conversation, to sleep, to eye contact. Grant Elwood didn't waste things, especially not minutes. He took a sip from a bitter black coffee, one he didn't particularly enjoy but drank out of habit, and gazed through the massive window beside him. His reflection blurred over the runway lights, ghost-like, flickering with every flash of a taxiing plane's wingtip beacon. Tomorrow, by 10 a.m., he was set to stand before the board of Dymos Capital, New York's biggest private equity firm. A merger pitch that could triple the valuation of his AI logistics platform was on the table. 10 years of building Elwood systems from a backroom algorithm into an international backbone had all led here. He should have felt triumphant, but the silence around him made the airport feel hollow, like a hallway leading to a door he didn't remember locking behind him. He exhaled and rubbed his temple. A red-eye flight meant he could sleep through the sky and land with just enough time to prep in the car before hitting the midtown skyscraper. He liked night flights, fewer distractions, fewer expectations to look engaged. The dark was good for thinking. He stood up as the pre-boarding announcement crackled overhead. First class, Group 1. Grant moved toward the gate casually, showing his digital ticket and passport to the tired agent. She barely looked up, just scanned and nodded. He entered the jet bridge, nodding at the flight attendant who greeted him mechanically, and turned left toward the business cabin. Seat 2A. Window, his usual. The plane smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and recycled air. Pillows were already tucked into the headrests, and the lights glowed a gentle amber. He stowed his briefcase, took out only his noise-canceling headphones, and eased into the seat. It was quiet. He pulled out his phone to review the executive summary one last time, but his thumb hovered mid-scroll. Suddenly aimless, outside, a line of economy passengers had started trickling in, tired, slow, bodies leaning with exhaustion. One man was juggling a crying baby and a diaper bag. A college student dragged a cello case. A woman in scrubs walked like her feet were made of bricks, and that's when he noticed them. Two kids, standing near row 17 unmoving. The boy, maybe 9, was blocking the aisle. Skinny, pale, his hands gripping the metal armrests on either side of him, like bracing against a storm. His hair was messy, but his spine was straight. He wasn't begging, he wasn't crying. He was waiting. Behind him, half slumped in a seat, was a little girl. Her head tilted forward, her arms limp, her mouth slightly open, breathing shallow. Flight attendants tried to guide passengers around them. Some stepped over backpacks, others muttered under their breath. Someone complained loudly about the delay, but the boy didn't move. He turned to the nearest crew member, his voice just audible over the boarding chatter. "She's sick," he said. "Please, she needs help." Grant's gaze lingered longer than he meant to. Then he looked away, back toward the tray table in front of him. Not your concern. This was always happening. People needed things. People broke down. The world was full of people trying to make their pain someone else's responsibility. But something tugged at the edges of his composure. The boy hadn't asked for money or food. He had asked for help. Grant glanced back again. The boy was still standing there, locked in place. The little girl hadn't moved. The boarding line was stalled, irritated. One of the flight attendants now looked exasperated, whispering something into her headset. Another minute passed. Still, no one helped. And that was the moment something inside Grant Elwood shifted quietly, like a door unlocking somewhere in the basement of memory. He set his phone down, unbuckled his seatbelt, and stood. Grant Elwood didn't speak as he walked down the narrow aisle. He moved quietly, stepping past the curtain divider that separated business from economy, his polished shoes soft against the carpeted floor. The scent changed as he crossed the threshold, less citrus cleaner, more human. Body heat, sleeplessness, anxiety. A low murmur of complaints hummed behind him. The queue was backed up. People were staring. The boy didn't look up. He was still clutching the seat backs of 17A and 17C, arms locked, as if bracing against turbulence that hadn't arrived yet. Grant stopped 2 steps away and crouched slightly, speaking just above a whisper. "Hey, what's going on?" The boy's eyes flicked up at him, blue-gray, red at the rims, but steady. "My sister," he said. "She's not breathing right." He said it like a statement, not a plea. Grant glanced down at the girl Hazel. He would learn later, but in this moment she was just a small, crumpled form half submerged in an economy seat. Her head lolled to one side, her lips tinged with blue. The air suddenly felt too still. "Has anyone called for help?" Grant asked, turning toward the crew. A flight attendant, a woman in her 30s with a tight bun and a name tag that read Mara, stepped forward. Her tone was professional but clipped. "We've asked them to return to the gate, sir, but the boy refuses to move, and the mother's not with them." "She's not here," the boy said. "We don't have anyone else." Another flight attendant leaned into her mic again, calling for ground medical personnel. A few passengers started murmuring louder now. One man in a blazer scoffed. "This is absurd," he said. "Can we board or not?" Grant ignored him. "Where are your parents?" he asked gently. The boy didn't hesitate. "Gone. It's just us. No tears. Just that it's just us." Grant knelt lower, his knees nearly brushing the floor of the plane. "What's your name, Leo? And your sister Hazel?" "She's 5. Grant studied the girl's face again, flushed and pale at the same time. A fine layer of sweat glistened on her forehead. "Has she eaten?" Leo hesitated. "Not since this morning. Any fever she had, one last night. I gave her Tylenol, then aspirin. I don't know which one's better. I looked it up on an old phone, but it died. I don't know anymore." His voice cracked just once. Passengers were now shifting in their seats, sighing louder. One woman asked if the airline would compensate for the delay. Mara, the flight attendant, stepped forward again. "We really need them to deplane, sir. The captain's waiting on a decision." "She's not contagious," Leo said, quick and sharp. "It's not COVID or anything. It's just, she's tired." The way he said it, tired held more weight than it should have. Like tired meant something closer to breaking. Grant stood up, just enough to meet Mara's eyes. "Has a medic been called? We're trying," she replied. "But protocol is to return to the gate. The crew can't administer aid unless cleared, then clear it." "Sir, I'm Grant Elwood," he said calmly. "Call the airport director if you have to. But get someone here now." Her face changed just slightly. Recognition flickered, and suddenly the murmurs behind them shifted. A few passengers leaned forward, squinting. Somewhere in the back, someone whispered, "Is that the tech guy Grant didn't notice or didn't care?" He sat gently in the empty aisle seat beside Hazel, reached out without touching, watched her chest rise and fall, listened. Too shallow, too slow. Leo didn't stop watching him. "You believe me now?" the boy asked. Grant nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do." Another flight attendant finally returned with a first aid kit and a radio crackling with a patchy voice on the other end, an airport nurse en route. But it wasn't fast enough. Hazel let out a weak, rattling cough that made her whole body shudder. Leo flinched. Grant reacted instinctively. He stood. "Where's your bag?" he asked the boy. "We don't have one. Just her blanket." "Then pick her up. What we're getting off this plane. Now." "But Leo, she doesn't need a seat. She needs a hospital." Leo hesitated, then nodded, gently, like he'd done it before. He unbuckled his sister and slid his arms beneath her small frame. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. He held her close, pressing her head to his shoulder. Grant turned to Mara. "Tell the captain to open the door." She stared for a second, then moved. The intercom buzzed. The jet bridge groaned as it extended again. Someone at the gate barked orders over a handheld radio. The businessman in row 3 shouted, "You're kidding me. He's delaying the flight for this." Grant turned his head slowly. "She's 5, he said. "You'll get there 10 minutes late. She might not wake up tomorrow." And the cabin fell silent. The gate door hissed shut behind them. Hazel stirred only slightly in Leo's arms, her forehead pressed to his collarbone, her breathing still thin, almost whisper-soft. Grant walked beside them in silence as they re-entered the waiting area. The chairs were mostly empty now. Only a janitor mopped near a vending machine, and a gate agent typed rapidly behind the counter, pretending not to stare. A medical technician, a man in blue scrubs with a security badge clipped to his chest, hurried through the automatic doors and approached. "Are you the emergency?" he asked. Grant stepped aside. "It's her," Leo said. "She's really hot and really cold at the same time, and she hasn't opened her eyes in hours." The technician nodded, took Hazel's temperature with a forehead scanner, then looked up sharply. 103.6. We've got to cool her down fast. Grant watched as the man knelt and began unpacking electrolyte solution, cooling strips, a miniature oxygen unit. But then a voice broke the moment. "Mr. Elwood." Grant turned. It was Mara, the flight attendant, holding a phone. "The captain needs to speak with you." He took the call. A clipped voice came through. "Calm. Corporate. Mr. Elwood. We've just been informed that if we don't push back in 7 minutes, we'll lose our clearance. I understand the situation's difficult, but we cannot delay further." "Are you planning to reboard?" Grant glanced at Leo, who was now sitting on the floor holding Hazel's hand while the technician placed a cool cloth across her forehead. "No," Grant said plainly. Silence on the line. "Then, I'm afraid we'll need to remove your luggage from the hold. Do what you have to." He ended the call. Behind him, the gate agent leaned over to whisper something to her colleague. One of them stared openly at the boy on the floor. "Do you have custody of these children?" "Sir," she asked cautiously. "No." Another pause. Grant met her eyes. "But I'm not leaving them." The woman looked startled. She didn't press further. Back on the plane, the captain gave the order to resume boarding. The aisle cleared. The passengers, who had been waiting in discomfort for over 15 minutes, were finally settling into their seats, blissfully unaware or willfully ignorant of the child who might have died beneath their feet. The technician finished his assessment. He looked up at Grant. "She needs a hospital, not just a nurse's station. The fever's bad, and her blood oxygen's low. Might be pneumonia, or worse." Leo stayed still, jaw tight. "We can call an ambulance," the tech continued, "but it'll take time. Traffic around the airport is jammed tonight." Grant checked his watch. The merger meeting in Manhattan was scheduled in 11 hours. If he left now, he could charter another red-eye, arrive with enough time to change his shirt and fake composure. But he didn't move, because suddenly the image of standing in that glass tower, PowerPoint in hand, looked like theater, like pretending. "What hospital would you send her to?" Grant asked. "Sloan. Pediatric wing, best we've got nearby. Then we'll go there directly. You have a car, I'll make a call." The technician nodded. Grant turned to Leo. "Can you carry her a little longer?" Leo nodded silently. They walked toward the exit, and then someone called out from behind, "Figures." It was the same businessman from 3C, dragging his roller bag past the gate, glaring at Grant. Drama always finds a rich, doesn't it? Cameras will love this. Grant didn't answer, but inside, something shifted. He wasn't angry, not exactly. He was disappointed that this was the default now, that compassion required PR, that kindness looked suspicious. He pulled out his phone, not to text his assistant, not to reschedule the meeting, but to open the rideshare app. "Let's get her to Sloan," he said. In the back of a black SUV, Leo kept Hazel on his lap while Grant sat beside them. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Outside, Seattle passed in a blur of wet streets and neon reflections. A steady drizzle tapped the windows. The heater hummed softly. Leo finally broke the silence. "You don't have to come with us." Grant looked at him. "I know. Then why are you—" There it was again, that same question, as clean and cutting as a blade. Why Grant thought about all the people he'd passed by before. Subway musicians, women begging with babies in their arms, veterans sleeping under scaffolding, people who vanished into the noise. He had built walls between himself and their needs so high. He stopped noticing, but not tonight. I'm still figuring that out, he said. Leo didn't reply, but his grip around his sister tightened. They arrived at Sloan Medical Center just after 10:00 p.m. The pediatric emergency entrance was quiet. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse took Hazel swiftly from Leo's arms and disappeared into a double door without ceremony. Leo looked like he might follow, but stopped. He stood frozen, alone again. Grant rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. She's in good hands. Leo stared at the doors. I know, he whispered, but I've had to be her hands, her arms, her voice. What if they don't know what she needs? Grant didn't have an answer. So he sat beside him and waited. Because sometimes presence was all that mattered. The waiting room was too quiet, just past the double doors. Hazel was somewhere inside the pediatric ER, her tiny body hooked to machines that beeped softly behind soundproof walls. An hour had passed, maybe more. Time didn't move the same in places like this. Leo sat with his arms crossed, curled up in a gray plastic chair 2 sizes too big for him. The coat they had wrapped around Hazel now draped across his knees. He hadn't asked for food. He hadn't looked at his phone. He hadn't even blinked much. Grant Elwood sat beside him, still in his tailored shirt, still looking like a man who belonged at a tech summit. Not here. But something in his posture had shifted. His spine wasn't straight. His hands weren't folded. His briefcase lay forgotten by the wall, unzipped and unattended. He looked at the boy, then at the vending machine, then at the pale green wall, and somewhere between all of it, a memory crept in. It started with a cough from another time, a damp apartment in northern Michigan, a mother wrapped in too many blankets, the radiator broken again, 8-year-old Grant pouring cold medicine into the cap, whispering, "Just drink this. Okay, it'll help." She never told him how sick she really was, just said, "You're the man of the house now," like it was a crown, but it was too heavy, too cold. She died 2 days later. Pneumonia, complications, no insurance. He never forgave her for making him feel like he had failed. And then, years later, he never forgave himself for trying to forget her. Leo shifted slightly, breaking the silence. "Do you have kids?" Grant hesitated. "No." "Did you ever want any?" He didn't answer immediately. That wasn't the kind of question Grant Elwood usually allowed into his world. It was personal, messy, slow, but tonight had already rewritten his rules. "I used to think I didn't," he said. "Too busy, too unpredictable. Didn't want to bring anyone into a life I couldn't control." "Hazel's life is never predictable," Leo murmured. Grant glanced over. The boy wasn't being sarcastic. He was just stating a fact. Leo looked down at his hands. "I used to think if I kept things organized, if I made her lunch the same every day, timed her naps, rationed the medicine, wrote everything down, I used to think I could keep her safe." He paused, "But sometimes I still messed up." Grant's chest tightened. He recognized that sentence. He had lived that sentence. "You didn't mess up, Leo," he said gently. "I waited too long to ask for help." Leo replied, almost a whisper, "I didn't want people to take us away from each other." Grant understood that fear. The system was cold. Even well-meaning officials could become obstacles. Separation was easy when paperwork didn't see love, just liability. "I know what it feels like," Grant said, "to be the one holding everything together. When you're a kid, and the person who's supposed to protect you can't anymore, it makes you older. Fast." Leo turned to him. "You too?" Grant nodded slowly. "I didn't have a sister, but I had a mom. We didn't always have heat or dinner, but I tried. I thought if I tried hard enough, maybe she wouldn't leave." Leo didn't speak, he just listened, and that was enough. A nurse stepped into the room. "Mr. Elwood." Both of them stood up at once. "She's stable," the nurse said. "The fever's coming down. We've started antibiotics, but her oxygen is still low, so we're admitting her overnight for observation." Leo let out a breath so deep it shook his shoulders. "She's awake. Not yet, but soon." Grant looked at Leo. "Do you want to see her?" The boy nodded, fast. The nurse led them through a hallway where the lights were soft and the floors gleamed from constant polishing. A curtain pulled back, revealing Hazel tucked into a narrow hospital bed. Ava taped to her arm, cheeks flushed but less pale than before. Leo stepped forward, took her hand, didn't say a word. Grant stayed by the door. His chest ached in that quiet, heavy way that didn't need language. He remembered the last time he saw his mother alive, the way her breathing sounded like it came through a tunnel. How he couldn't tell if she was asleep or simply done trying. That helplessness had shaped his entire life. And yet now, watching this boy and this girl, something softened. A voice behind him broke the silence. "She's lucky you brought her when you did," said a woman in a lab coat. "Another hour might have been too late." Grant turned. She extended her hand. "Dr. Calder, I'm on the pediatric team. Grant Elwood," he said, shaking it. She nodded toward Leo. "He your son." He looked at her, at Hazel, at Leo, then back at her. "Not yet." Hazel blinked. Just once, then again. Her eyelashes fluttered softly like bird wings in early morning light. She didn't speak, but her fingers, resting beneath the pulse oximeter clip, curled ever so slightly. Hazel Leo whispered. Her lips parted, barely audible, her voice cracked like wind through broken glass. "Lee." The sound fractured something in Grant's chest. Leo leaned forward, tears instantly streaming down his face, silent and free. "I'm here," he whispered. "I didn't leave. I promised." Hazel blinked again. Her gaze wandered toward the ceiling, unfocused. Her breathing was still shallow, but it had rhythm now, like the slow turning of a music box just beginning to wind back up. She faded into sleep again, but she had spoken, and that was enough. Later, as the machines beeped quietly and Hazel rested, Grant stepped out of the room. The hallway outside was sterile and hushed. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air. He walked slowly toward the corner near the vending machines, pulled out his phone, and stared at the screen. 29 missed calls, 12 urgent emails. A calendar ping reminding him that in 3 hours, the private car service would be arriving at JFK to pick him up. A final reminder from his assistant boardroom at Dimos Capital, 9:00 a.m. Merger pitch with Synertech Group. Projected valuation $2.1 billion. He could still make it, barely. If he left now, hailed a car, took a charter out of Teterboro. He could arrive breathless and dramatic, reframe it as an emergency that proved commitment, charm them, recover, win. But he didn't move. He stared at Hazel's name on the hospital chart clipped to the room door, Hazel Bennett, age 5. A child who wasn't his, a meeting that would change his future. And between the two, a choice. His fingers hovered over the screen, then tapped. He called Logan, his COO. Logan answered in a rush. "Grant, thank God. We've been trying to reach you. The pitch starts in, I'm not coming." A beat of silence. "What, I'm not boarding any flight tonight or tomorrow. You're serious. There's a 5-year-old in ICU. I'm staying with her and her brother until we know what comes next." "Grant," Logan said cautiously, "I'm saying this with complete respect, but you do understand what's at stake here?" "Yes," he replied calmly. "You step out now and you lose everything we've built. Not just funding, legacy. You're the face of this company." Grant glanced back toward Hazel's room. "No," he said, "not anymore." He ended the call. No rage, no tears, just quiet clarity. He turned the phone to silent and slid it back into his pocket. The vibration of follow-ups buzzed like insects against fabric, but he didn't reach for it again. Somewhere down the hallway, a janitor was humming softly, wiping down a water fountain. The world continued on. Back in the room. Leo was half asleep beside Hazel's bed. He hadn't let go of her hand in hours. The blanket had fallen off one shoulder, but he didn't notice. He looked smaller tonight, no longer a fierce protector, just a child. Grant walked in and gently placed a second blanket over his lap, then sat. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. He let his head lean back against the wall, exhaled, and for the first time in years, he allowed the silence to stay. No meetings, no data points, no revenue projections, just breathing, just heart monitors, just a boy and his sister alive, together, because of a decision made at 35,000 feet. Outside, snow had begun to fall, not in furious flurries, but slow, lazy spirals that caught in the light from the emergency signs and disappeared against the night. A nurse peeked in around midnight. "She's resting well, fever's broken, heart steady. She's a fighter. She's got a good team," Grant said softly. The nurse smiled. "She's lucky." Grant didn't respond, because inside, a storm had begun to rise, not a storm of panic or second-guessing, but a storm of truth. And once it started, it didn't stop. He looked at Leo again, curled up in that chair with one arm still draped across his sister. He saw something familiar there. Not in appearance, but in energy. He remembered being the one who stayed awake, the one who calculated doses, the one who whispered stories in the dark to keep someone else from being afraid. He remembered failing and promising no one would ever see that part of him again. Until now. By morning, the story had already broken. Somewhere between the neon hospital glow and the first yawn of sunrise, a blurry photo hit social media. It showed Grant Elwood, multi-millionaire CEO, the man once dubbed the silent strategist by Fortune, standing in the aisle of Flight 722 talking to a barefoot boy holding an unconscious girl in his arms. The post had been made by another passenger, captioned simply, "This guy stopped an entire flight to help 2 kids nobody else would within hours." It had over 800,000 likes. A trending hashtag emerged by mid-morning. Elwood stayed by noon. So did the speculation. Was it a PR stunt? Was he losing his edge? Was he abandoning a billion-dollar deal? The news cycles sharpened their claws. Grant sat in the quietest corner of the hospital cafeteria, sipping black coffee from a paper cup, unmoved by the headlines flashing across his phone. He didn't scroll. He didn't refresh. He just sat. A few tables away, Leo nursed a chocolate milk. He looked cleaner now. Grant had arranged for fresh clothes through a nurse who kept spare donations for pediatric emergencies. But he still sat with the cautious posture of someone waiting for bad news. Across from him, a hospital administrator in a charcoal suit laid out a clipboard. "You're listed as the emergency contact," she asked Grant. "No," he replied. "There is no emergency contact." The woman hesitated. "I see. And your relationship to the children?" Grant glanced at Leo, then back. "I'm the reason they're here." She didn't flinch, but her tone shifted. "I understand, Mr. Elwood. However, in the absence of legal guardianship or family documentation, the state may intervene." "No," Grant said, calm but clear. "That won't happen." The woman blinked. "Sir, with all respect, I'll file for emergency custody," he continued. "Today, you'll get whatever you need: background checks, address verification, security clearance." He reached into his bag, pulled out a folder. Inside were notarized letters of reference, copies of his own records, a signed affidavit from a former judge who now worked with his foundation. The administrator's eyebrows lifted. "You came prepared." Grant folded his hands. No child should be separated from the only person they trust because adults were too slow with paperwork. The woman softened slightly, nodded. "I'll forward this to Child Services directly. They'll want to conduct an interview. I'll be here." As they stood, another figure entered the cafeteria, tall, tanned, wearing a cashmere coat far too pristine for this setting. Victor Halston, the first-class passenger. He spotted Grant immediately. "Mr. Elwood," he drawled. "I see you're still playing savior." Grant didn't react. Victor walked closer, the grin on his face curled like smoke. "Now the media's fawning over you. Compassionate CEO halts flight for homeless kids. It's a cute look. You'll get a foundation award, maybe a TED Talk." Leo tensed. Grant remained seated. Victor leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Let me guess. You figured out how to turn this into your next vertical." Foster Tech Crisis as a Service. Grant finally looked up and smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile you gave someone who didn't know what door they just walked through. "I'm not selling this," Grant said softly. "I'm living it." Victor's face stiffened. Grant stood. "You were right about one thing, though. People are watching. So if I were you, I'd be careful what you say next. You wouldn't want your firm's board seeing video of you stepping over a sick child." Victor's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. He turned and walked out. Grant watched him disappear into the hallway, then turned back to Leo. "You okay?" Leo nodded. Was that the angry guy from the plane? "Yeah." Leo shrugged. "He's not very good at being scary." Grant almost laughed. Later that day, a CPS caseworker arrived, middle-aged, tired eyes, warm voice. She spoke with Leo for nearly an hour in a playroom filled with puzzles and faded coloring books. She came out holding a file and looked at Grant. "You're not what I expected." Grant raised an eyebrow. "Because I wear cufflinks." "No," she said. "Because you stayed." He nodded, said nothing. She glanced at the papers again. I'll expedite the emergency order. It's not every day someone walks in and wants to take responsibility." He looked toward the window. Snow had turned to rain, and traffic lights blinked slowly outside. "I'm not taking responsibility," he said. "I'm honoring it." Back in Hazel's room, the girl had woken up again. This time her eyes stayed open longer. She smiled faintly when she saw Leo. Then, slowly, she turned her head and saw Grant. She didn't speak, but her gaze held his for a long moment. Soft, quiet, unquestioning. And in that moment, he felt something shift. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't duty. It was something simpler. He belonged here, not as a savior, but as someone staying. Grant stood near the hospital window, arms folded loosely, watching the rain roll down the glass. Below, the city moved like nothing had changed. Taxis still honked. Nurses still walked briskly beneath umbrellas. Somewhere in the distance, the echo of a subway rumbled through underground steel. But up here, in room 407 of Sloan's pediatric wing, time felt suspended. Hazel was asleep again, peacefully this time. Her fever had broken. Her breathing was steady. Leo sat beside her, sketching quietly on a hospital notepad with a dull pencil. It looked like a picture of their apartment. Grant had asked nothing, but he could see the worn couch, the cracked ceiling tile, the broken heater drawn in careful lines. He watched the boy for a moment, and then his phone rang again. Logan. He let it ring. Then it rang again. Another number, this time from the board chair of Elwood Systems. He answered. "Grant, you need to speak with us now. I'm listening. We called an emergency meeting. Half the board is demanding a formal explanation. The press is running wild. Stock volatility is up 7%. I told Logan I wasn't coming to the pitch. I'm not hiding that. It's not just about the pitch. Grant, people are asking whether you're still fit to lead the company. Whether this hesitated personal detour reflects a shift in values. It does. Excuse me." Grant's voice was calm, measured. "It reflects that I'm no longer the kind of leader who pretends revenue is more important than reality. I'm not apologizing for that." There was a long silence. "Grant," the board member said carefully, "I've known you a long time. You built Elwood Systems with your bare hands, but you're making decisions that frankly don't make sense in a corporate context. Maybe the context is the problem," Grant replied. "Listen." The voice lowered. "Between us, I'm not unsympathetic, but the world doesn't stop because you found a conscience." Grant looked over at Leo, who had now drawn a tiny version of Hazel, curled under a blanket. "No," he said quietly, "but maybe I needed to." That evening, an email hit his inbox. Subject: Shareholder Confidence Inquiry Message. A vote of no confidence was being proposed by 2 members of the board. A temporary replacement CEO was being considered. Grant stared at the message and smiled because he didn't feel panicked. He felt clear. He closed the laptop. A nurse peeked into the room. "There's someone in the lobby asking for you," she said. Said her name is Olivia Miles. She showed credentials from the National Children's Trust. Grant raised an eyebrow. The nurse added, "She said she saw the photo. She came to help." In the lobby, Olivia stood in a forest green trench coat, soaked at the shoulders. She was in her late 40s, hair streaked with silver, eyes sharp and kind. "You're the CEO who stayed," she said as he approached. "I'm Grant," he offered. "I know." She smiled. I run a nonprofit that helps place sibling groups into single-family homes. Most get split up. Some disappear into the system. But I saw your face. I saw how you looked at that boy. And I said to myself, that man gets it. He didn't respond right away. So she continued, I'm not here to congratulate you. I'm here to offer help, legal help, emotional help, educational advisors, therapy grants. If you're serious about keeping those kids together, we can move faster than the courts. Grant finally nodded. I'm serious. She smiled, a little softer this time. Then let's start building something that lasts. Back upstairs, Leo met Grant at the door. She woke up again. He said, Did she say anything? Leo hesitated. She asked if we were going home. Grant kneeled beside him. What did you say I didn't know? Grant looked at him for a long moment, then placed a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. How about this next week? We'll visit a house I know. It's not fancy, but it's warm, it's safe, and it's got 2 bedrooms, one for you, one for her. Leo's eyes widened. You're not leaving. Grant shook his head. I already made that mistake once in my life. I'm not doing it again. Leo didn't answer, but this time he didn't look afraid. The rain finally stopped that night. Outside, the street lights flickered on. Inside, the monitors glowed green with quiet, rhythmic pulses, and somewhere in the building, the elevator dinged softly, like the world was shifting floor by floor. Grant sat in the corner, no longer holding the line for a company, now holding it for a promise. Hazel had been laughing, a soft, wind chime kind of laugh, the kind you almost missed if you weren't listening for it. She had been coloring a page with her left hand, her dominant hand still taped to an IV, and Leo had drawn a crooked unicorn that looked more like a potato with legs. And for a moment, just a moment, everything felt light. Until it didn't. It started with a blink. Hazel's eyes drooped, her lips went pale. Then came the wheeze, a sharp intake of air that didn't seem to find space in her lungs. Her head tilted back slightly, and her hands trembled. Hazel Leo asked, but she didn't answer. She tried to sit up, then froze. The monitor beside her bed let out a high, unfamiliar tone, then a second, then a flat line. The code team burst through the doors within seconds. Nurses, a doctor, a technician rolling a crash cart. Grant grabbed Leo just in time, just before the boy could launch himself toward her bed. No! Leo screamed. No! Not again. He fought against Grant's arms, his voice cracking into something primal. She was okay. She was okay. Grant didn't speak. He just held him the way no one had held him the night his own mother slipped away. Back when his cries had echoed against empty walls, the way someone should have. The door slammed shut, and Hazel disappeared behind a blur of gloves, wires, and controlled chaos. 36 minutes later, the doctor emerged. Her name was Dr. Chen, short, serious, sleepless eyes. She's stable again, she said, but there's something we need to discuss. Grant and Leo followed her into a side room. The lighting was dimmer, the walls soft beige, but the air inside felt heavier. She has myocarditis, Doctor, Chen explained. It's an inflammation of the heart muscle, often viral, but sometimes congenital. The arrhythmia triggered her collapse. Leo stared at her, wide-eyed. What does that mean? He asked. It means her heart is struggling to keep pace, she said gently. We've stabilized her with meds, but if her condition doesn't improve, she may need a pacemaker or open-heart surgery. Leo's hands balled into fists. Grant stepped in. What's the timeline? We'll monitor her for the next 48 hours. If she responds to the anti-inflammatories and steroids, we hold. If not, surgical intervention becomes non-optional. And without it, Grant asked. The doctor paused. Her heart could stop again. Next time, we might not bring her back. The silence that followed was brutal. Leo whispered, "Can I see her?" Dr. Chen nodded, but just for a minute. Let her rest. In the room, Hazel was pale again, her cheeks drawn, lips slightly dry. Leo walked to her bedside and placed his hand gently on hers. She didn't stir. Grant stood in the doorway, watching, remembering. He saw himself in Leo again, only this time, not just the burdened boy. He saw the decision-maker, the one who had no legal power, no blood connection, and yet stood closer than anyone else in the world to that child's future. He could walk away. No one would blame him. He could write a check, fund a trust, set up a program, but none of that would hold Hazel's hand when she woke up from surgery. None of that would catch Leo if the worst happened. He stepped forward, sat in the chair beside her bed, and whispered softly, "I'm not going anywhere." Later that night, Grant stood in the hallway, speaking quietly with Olivia Miles. "She needs surgery if she doesn't respond," he told her, "but I'm not her father, not legally. You're petitioning," Olivia reminded him. "Emergency custody can be expedited. But what if I sign off on a high-risk operation and something goes wrong?" She looked at him. "What if you don't, and something still does?" Grant said nothing. So Olivia added, "Sometimes choosing to love someone means making decisions you're afraid to live with." He looked at her, long and hard, then nodded. "I'll sign." He spent the rest of the night beside Hazel's bed. The rain had returned soft, persistent, like a lullaby for the broken. Leo had finally fallen asleep on the bench in the corner, curled up with Hazel's blanket against his chest. Grant sat with his laptop open but not working, just typing something he hadn't written in years. A personal letter to Hazel. "Dear Hazel, you don't know me yet. Not really. And maybe you never will remember this part of your story. But I'll remember it for you. Because the moment your brother looked up and asked someone to care, I heard him. And I saw you. And I said yes. I said yes to staying. Yes to trying. Yes to risking something I never thought I'd open again. My heart. If you wake up and need me, I'll be there. If you grow strong and run ahead, I'll follow. If you forget everything that came before, I'll still remember. Because family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's who sits beside you when everything falls apart. Love, Grant." He hit save and watched the cursor blink in silence. The hospital at 300A, was a different world. The pediatric floor was dim, corridors hushed, monitors blinked softly like distant stars. The air was heavier, quieter, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Grant hadn't left Hazel's room in hours. He sat beside her bed, his elbow on the armrest, chin resting on the knuckles of his right hand. The chair creaked every now and then, reminding him it wasn't built for waiting, but he didn't care. Hazel was asleep, peacefully this time. Her breathing was steady. The heart monitor no longer beeped like a metronome of danger. It was slow, even, but the clock above the door ticked too loudly, because every second was part of the countdown. 48 hours. If she responded to the meds, her heart might begin to repair itself. If she didn't, surgery, and everything that came with it. Across the room, Leo stirred in his sleep. He was lying on the bench, still curled up like a comma. Hazel's favorite cartoon blanket pulled to his chin. His shoes were off, but he hadn't let them stray far, placed right beside him, like he needed to be ready to run again, even in sleep. He looked alert, braced, like trust was still a foreign language. The morning came in slow. Pale gray light spilled across the windows as a nurse entered the room, whisper soft. She checked the IV, scribbled on her chart, and gave Grant a small nod. No fever, she mouthed. Grant exhaled just barely. At 9 a.m., Olivia arrived with a court liaison, a young woman in a pressed blazer, holding a manila envelope and an electronic tablet. "We fast-tracked it," Olivia said. "Judge signed it this morning." Grant took the tablet. He didn't hesitate this time. He signed, "Full emergency guardianship, effective immediately, legal until a full review and adoption hearing could be scheduled." It wasn't about control. It was about responsibility. Hazel wasn't his by blood, neither was Leo. But they were his now by something far older, far deeper than paperwork presence. He handed the tablet back. The liaison smiled, almost surprised. "Most people get nervous before this part," she said. "I've made harder decisions," Grant replied. Then he paused, "but not more important ones." Leo woke sometime mid-morning. His eyes fluttered open and scanned the room quickly, first Hazel, then the door. "Still here," Grant said softly. Leo sat up. "Did she? She's stable, still resting." He rubbed his eyes. "What time is it?" "Late morning. Did you leave at all?" "No." Leo nodded, then looked down. He fiddled with his shoelaces for a moment, then said, "People always leave." Grant didn't respond immediately, just sat beside him on the bench. "I know," he said at last. Leo looked up, his voice sharp. "No, you don't." Grant took a breath. "I was 8 when my mom died," he said. "We didn't have family. No one stayed after, just foster homes and rules and stairs that creaked no matter how soft you walked." Leo's mouth parted. "But you're rich," he said. "You made it." Grant smiled faintly. "Yeah, but success doesn't erase what built it." He turned to face him fully. "I made it out. But I left a part of myself behind when I did. I told myself I didn't need anyone, that I was stronger alone. But then I met you." Leo looked confused. You remind me of who I would have been," Grant said, "if someone had chosen to stay." The door opened. Dr. Chen entered with a nurse behind her. Both wore unreadable expressions. Grant stood. "Well." The doctor exhaled. "She's responding," she said. "The inflammation is receding. Her blood oxygen is holding. The arrhythmia is stabilizing." Leo gasped. "She's getting better." Dr. Chen smiled soft but real. "Yes, slowly but steadily." Grant let his head fall back for a second, then closed his eyes. He didn't say anything, because relief has no words. Leo stood there, blinking hard. Then he turned to Grant. "Does this mean she won't need surgery too early to say?" "Doctor," Chen replied. "But this is a good sign, a very good one." The nurse stepped forward with a clipboard. She's sleeping now, but when she wakes, she'll be moved to the step-down unit. Leo turned to Grant. Will we stay with her? Of course, Grant said. I mean, like, after Grant looked at him, really looked. Leo, he said gently, you're not going back to that apartment. Not alone. Not ever again. Leo's lips trembled. I was scared you'd change your mind. Grant crouched in front of him. People like Victor walk away. People like me, his voice softened. We walk with you. Leo didn't respond with words. He stepped forward and hugged him. Not a hesitant hug. Not the kind a kid gives because he's told to. A real one. A hug that said, I believe you now. That night, Hazel woke up. She turned toward them, weak but curious. Her voice was soft. Is this the new place? Leo looked confused. What do you mean? She smiled faintly. This room, it smells different. It smells clean. Grant stepped forward. It's not the new place, Hazel. It's the place before the new place. She blinked. Are you coming too? Grant knelt beside her. Yes, he said, always. The adoption hearing was set for a Thursday morning. The courtroom wasn't large, no cameras, no reporters, just clean white walls, soft lighting, and the faint hum of fluorescent bulbs. A clerk shuffled papers quietly at a desk. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and a warm but measured voice, reviewed the file for a moment before speaking. In the matter of Hazel and Leo Bennett, she said, this court acknowledges the petition for full legal adoption by Mr. Grant Elwood. Emergency guardianship was approved 21 days ago, during which time the children have remained under his continuous care. She looked up. Do the children wish to remain with Mr. Elwood? Leo sat up a little straighter. He was dressed in a navy blazer, slightly too big for him, but his voice came out clear. Yes, ma'am. The judge turned to Hazel. She was seated beside Grant, her hair now growing back in soft blonde waves after weeks of illness. She wore a yellow dress with little stitched flowers near the hem. She nodded, then added in a whisper, He makes the pancakes better than the box says. There was a soft laugh in the room. The judge smiled, then looked at Grant. You understand this is permanent. Mr. Elwood, I do, and that you will be solely responsible for all decisions concerning their welfare, health, and future. Yes, he said, I already am. There was a beat of silence. Then the judge picked up her pen, signed the final form, and spoke the words that mattered most. This court recognizes Hazel and Leo Bennett as the legal children of Grant Elwood, henceforth and permanently. She removed her glasses, smiling again. Congratulations, you're a family. Outside, the sky was clear for the first time in days. Not dramatic, just blue, soft, simple. Grant held both their hands as they exited the courthouse steps. Olivia was waiting beside a car, holding two balloons, one shaped like a heart, the other a paper airplane. Big day, she said. Hazel nodded solemnly. I'm not a patient anymore. I'm a person again. Olivia smiled. Yes, you are. Leo turned to Grant. Are we going to the new place now? Grant nodded. It wasn't the penthouse. He'd sold that. Instead, it was a house an hour outside the city. 2 stories, a wraparound porch, trees that moved even when the wind was still, a yard full of leaves waiting for someone to jump into them. They arrived in the late afternoon. The front door was already open. A welcome mat sat slightly crooked, like someone had walked in and never looked down again. Leo dropped his bag near the stairs. Hazel stood in the doorway, blinking. "Is this real?" she asked. Grant knelt beside her. "Yes, this is home." She stepped inside, not cautiously, not fearfully, but with wonder. That evening, Grant made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup in the kitchen, while Hazel drew pictures at the counter and Leo tried to figure out how to reset the Wi-Fi. There were no suits, no ringing phones, no urgent boardroom slides, only warmth and laughter, and something Grant hadn't felt in a very long time: belonging. Later that night, when the children were asleep, Hazel with her blanket bunched up under her chin, Leo with the flashlight still on in his room, Grant stepped out onto the porch. The stars were faint, but visible. He held a mug of tea in his hands. No headlines buzzed in his pocket, no meeting invites, no "where are you" texts, just stillness. And in that stillness, he allowed himself to feel it. The transformation, not from billionaire to father, not from strategist to savior, but from absent to present. He sat down in the old wooden rocking chair left behind by the previous owners. Let it creak under him. Let it speak. The past no longer haunted him. It instructed him. That little boy who had once stood in the middle of a freezing room, terrified of losing the only person who ever cared, he hadn't vanished. He had grown up, he had built a life, and then he had found his way back to the place he never knew he needed: a family. The screen door creaked. Tiny footsteps approached. Hazel, in pajama pants with planets on them, stood beside him. "I had a dream," she said. "Good or bad?" She shrugged, kind of both. She climbed into his lap without asking, rested her head against his chest. "You okay now?" he asked softly. "Yeah," she said. "Are you?" He smiled. "Yeah, I think I am." She looked up at the sky. "There's no plane sounds." "No," he said. "Not tonight." She yawned. "That's good. We don't have to go anywhere." Grant kissed the top of her head. "No," he whispered. "We're already where we're supposed to be." Sometimes, the most powerful decisions are made not in boardrooms or behind glass towers, but in silence. Beside a child's hospital bed, Grant Elwood didn't lose his legacy by choosing to stay. He rewrote it, not with quarterly profits or trending hashtags, but with presence, with protection, and with love that asked for nothing in return. Because love isn't weak, compassion isn't inefficient, and being there, truly, there's the rarest kind of strength. But this story also asks us to look deeper. Why was no one else willing to stop? Why was a barefoot boy ignored on a plane full of adults? What does it say about our systems when a man needs power to make kindness matter? This isn't just a story about adoption. It's a story about seeing those we're trained to overlook. So, if this moved you, let it move others. Share this story with someone who needs hope. Hit like if you believe every child deserves to be seen. Subscribe to this channel for more true, emotional stories that matter. Because next time, the person no one notices might be the one who saves us all.